Today's episode is called The Struggle is Real in Child Custody. Okay. And the struggle is real. Let me just tell you. So, if you're dealing with a high conflict co parent, it's exhausting, right? I mean, it's just draining. And sometimes you can struggle just to get through each day. And, we're often waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak, right? Because there's always another shoe that's going to be dropping when you're dealing with somebody that's high conflict because they cycle and they'll be calm for a while. And then you're sitting around going, oh, it's too quiet. Oh, it's too calm. It's kind of like when your kids are in the other room and they're not making any noise. You're like, better go check on them. That's what happens. Let me just take a minute and say, if you're listening to the podcast, please rate and review me and subscribe so you get notified as new episodes come out. If you're watching this video on YouTube, don't forget to hit like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so you're notified as new episodes are released each week. Let's hop into this. Okay, the struggle is real and we're waiting on the other shoe to drop, and messages will come and they're exhausting and they're attacking and all these different things. And so how do we get through this? And I think that, the only way that you can get through this type of thing is to, try to understand how this is going to serve a purpose in your life. Now, you've heard me say I'm a big personal growth junkie. I love all that kind of stuff. I listen to a lot of Tony Robbins and Brendan Burchard, Brian Tracy, all the different big names I listen to a lot of, and Steve Harvey, I think he's great. And so one of the things that, Tony Robbins in particular talks about is that, you're not going to grow. You're not going to move from where you are without struggle, without crisis, without change. And so almost nobody goes, oh yeah, struggle. Let me sign up for that. You want to shift my whole world? You want to take my life and dump it upside down? Okay, sure. Let me sign up for that. And, I've shared, I lost Thomas a couple months ago unexpectedly due to a surfing accident. And so this is kind of the phase I'm in too, right? I'm struggling around a different issue, but still this is a struggle. And so I have two options. I can either let myself get depressed because the struggle feels too hard and too difficult, or I can reframe it and say, look, this is my opportunity to use this for growth, right? It doesn't mean I like it. It doesn't mean I go, oh, just pour more struggles on me, right? It's like when we pray for patience, what does God do? He gives us an issue that we need to be patient around. Really, it's about taking this struggle in your co-parenting situation and asking yourself, how can I grow from this? How can I get better at this? How can I become a better parent? How can I communicate better with my ex? How can I, do all the things that I need to do to grow through this crisis? One of the things that you have to do when you're in these situations is you really have to prioritize your self-care. And, I know that can be very cliche in a lot of ways. And I know that we're told this over and over, but sometimes just because you're told something doesn't mean that you're doing it. But honestly, if you're a parent, especially, then if your tank is empty, you can't be present for your kids. You can't parent as effectively. You can't, interact in the same way if you're just sitting there exhausted and drained. Taking an evening away from the kids or if you're listening to this, you're probably in a parenting plan. So you probably have evenings where the kids aren't there, right? And so what are you doing on those evenings? Are we just sitting in front of the TV, eating a tub of ice cream and going to bed? I mean, that's probably not the greatest form of self-care. I suppose that is a form of it, but it's not a form that's going to allow you to contribute or give back to your kids or your family or your own life or whatever you want to accomplish. All those types of things that make you feel better about yourself, make you feel more confident, make you feel like you have the power to face the world. Sometimes that's going to dinner with a friend. Sometimes it's being involved in a social group. Sometimes it's contributing at the food bank or participating in your church's activities or wherever it is that gives you that juice that re-energizes you. Some people need more quiet time. If you just sit and wait for self-care to fall on you, it's not going to happen. You've got to be intentional about those things and about prioritizing and knowing that when you're doing your self-care, that you're not only contributing to your own well-being in your own life, but if you're a parent, you're contributing to your children's lives, because a fulfilled, rested, energized parent is going to be able to engage better with the children than a parent that is depressed and exhausted and all of those things. So you have to determine what that self-care is for you, but you do have to be intentional about it and prioritize it. Because if your little has gone to the other parent and you have the time that you could sleep 12 hours, but you're not intentional about that, what are you probably going to do? You're going to sit down at your computer and you're going to get caught up on some work. You're going to sit down in front of your TV and you're going to binge watch a show. You're going to, do those types of things that actually make it worse, right? Then you're more tired. You didn't get caught up on sleep. The kid comes back. Now you're still sleep deprived. They're back. Nothing's any better. You're, shorter with your temper. You're more emotional. You're all those things because you're tired. So being intentional in planning these things and really blocking out your calendar and saying, this is what I'm doing on this day to prioritize my own self-care. Okay. Second thing is boundaries. And I know you hear this word over and over and over, and good self-care involves having good boundaries. But what exactly does that mean? Like, we hear this over and over and over, right? Oh, you're going to have better boundaries. Oh, you don't have good boundaries. Oh, you're codependent. You have no boundaries, right? We've heard it all. And so what does that look like? Well, what that looks like is when you are putting other people's needs ahead of your own. And I don't necessarily mean the children in this situation. Obviously, your children, especially the littler they are, the more they're going to need you. But sometimes, especially with a little bit older kids, we do still fall into the trap, even with our kids, of not having a good boundary with the child. And, oh, you forgot your math book. Okay, let me just run it over to school, or instead of saying, well, I'm sorry, I guess you don't have a math book for today, so you'll have to solve that problem. You'll have to see if you can borrow one from somebody else. You'll have to see if you can, maybe you get a bad grade on the assignment today, or you flunk the test or whatever, and then you have a bad grade, and then you have a consequence for that, all because you forgot your math book. And then guess what? Next time, you won't forget your math book. So it can apply to kids, but obviously the younger they are, the more hands-on care that they need. And I don't think that you need to be drawing boundaries with your toddler. But kids aren't typically the biggest issue. A lot of times the biggest issue is the ex. And, sometimes this comes in the form of, the church comes and says, hey, we need an extra person in the nursery. Can you do Sundays, or can you do one Sunday a month in the nursery? And so those types of things or other commitments that come up. And so that all involves boundaries, whether it's your ex, whether it's people asking things of you. And so you have to say to yourself, hey, is this something I want to do? Is this something that is part of what I feel God's purpose is for me? Is this part of something that's going to fulfill my life? Is this part of something where this is a mutual relationship that I'm in, and I get things from it and they get things from it, and we help each other and we do life together? That's a very different thing. Just being able to say that sometimes, like, we're embarrassed or we're afraid of upsetting people or whatever. But what are you compromising? You're compromising your own self-care because you can't draw a boundary. And then what happens a lot of times is then, okay, I'm going to go and I start doing this monthly thing in the church nursery every week or once a month. Only now I start to resent it. And by month 3 or 4, I'm thinking, why do I have to do this? Why did they even ask me to do this? I'm not the person for this. And, I wish I wasn't in here, and I'm resenting this, and I'm, not very patient with the kids, and because I'm having all these emotions around it. Well, it's not the kid's fault. It's not even the person's fault that asked me to do it. It would be my fault because I didn't draw that boundary. This can start to give you some insight. And, that's the first step in learning to break these patterns. If you don't even know you're doing something, there's no way that you can start to do it better. You have to have the feedback. You have to have the outside observation in order to be able to start shifting it and changing it, which results in your growth and improvement and increases your happiness. The next thing that is going to help you in this struggle is your faith. Whatever that is for you. For me, that's God. For me, I'm a Christian. I believe Christ died on the cross for us and saved us. And so whatever that is for you, whether that's the universe or your creator or whatever you refer to it as, your faith is going to be some of the foundational part of getting through this struggle. Because first of all, sometimes things are just things you can't control, right? And you have to just be able to have that faith that it's going to work out, right? What is faith? Faith is evidence of things not seen. And so even though you can't see it and you can't see the way of how it's going to work out, you still need to have that faith that it's going to. And some days that's the only thing that gets you through. When you can say, my purpose is, that I'm training up these children. My purpose is to raise good moral human beings, or my purpose is to serve others and contribute. Whatever it is for you, my purpose is to build a business that can then give me enough money to go over and do this charity work and contribute to these other people in these other ways. All of those types of things that give you some purpose outside of yourself are critical to get yourself outside of your own head each and every day. And I mean, you guys, I'm preaching to myself a little bit here because this is the struggle I'm in right now, right? How do I keep from focusing on what's missing, aka Thomas, and focus on what I'm here to do, what I'm here to contribute, and how do I carry his legacy, our legacy forward? And so again, if you're struggling in your day-to-day, you don't have a big enough why. You got to get outside yourself and figure out something greater than yourself that you're contributing to. You don't know like what you're going through. Maybe one of your kids is going to go through this in 20 years and you're going to be able to help them and support them and understand what they're going through because you've been through it. Maybe you're going to have a parent or a sibling or a friend or a new mate or a whoever that goes through it as well, whatever your current struggle is. And you're going to be able to come alongside them and say, look, I understand. You got to have faith that there's a purpose in it and that it's going to be used for your good and the good of people around you. Now, look, when your attention and your focus is on you, guess what it's not on? It's not on your ex. It's not on the struggle, right? And if you're dealing with a high conflict personality, somebody who is narcissistic or borderline or bipolar or, and if you have any of those things, I'm not saying you're necessarily high conflict. A lot of them are, a lot of them learn to manage it and are not and whatever, but extreme versions of these things a lot of times are high conflict when they have, very extreme versions of these diagnoses. And so when you're dealing with this, what that high conflict person usually wants is for your focus to be on them. That's what they want. That's the currency. Your attention is the currency. And so the more that you give that to them, the more you're feeding the beast, right? And the larger the beast gets, the more we feed it. And so because they thrive on it, the only way to knock it out is to cut off the supply, right? So you don't put your attention there. You don't put your focus there. You don't make it all about them. That's probably what you were doing through the relationship, right? That's what I was doing in my first relationship, making it all about him. And so if you continue to do that post separation, then you're continuing that same dynamic. And so you're getting all the bad parts of the breakup, but none of the good. So you have to really cut that off and put your focus on the positive aspects of your life, figuring out what your why is, figuring out what makes you thrive, what gives you that juice in life, and figuring out how to make that happen and being intentional about it, putting it in your calendar, putting in your bedtime, putting in your prayer time, putting in your meditation, putting in your time with friends, putting in your work hours, whatever, so that you know each and every day that you're meeting those needs. And listen, you can go about that haphazardly. It's not as effective, but you can go about it haphazardly if you're in a place where there's not much upheaval in your life. But look, if you're in a struggle is real time, and if you're listening to this episode, I'm assuming you are, then things are not just going to happen automatically. You've got to be intentional about planning this stuff and planning your self-care and putting things in place so that you're not in a tumultuous state over every little thing that happens, right? So that you've got a plan and you know what your path forward is. I hope this episode has been helpful. Again, you're watching me on YouTube. Please hit like and subscribe if you're listening to the podcast. Rate and review me, and also hit subscribe. That way you guys know when new episodes come out each week. And I will see you soon.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.